Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter. Hey everyone, welcome again to the CPG Guys podcast. I'm PVSB, one of the aforementioned CPG guys, and I'm coming to you today from Chicago. My colleague Sri is otherwise occupied, so I'll be handling the hosting duties on my own. Sri, you're missed. Wish you were here with me. We're actually recording today's episode from the Chicago offices of Fetch Rewards. And as you know, when I'm not podcasting, I serve as the Vice President of Business-to-Business Strategy and Development at Fetch Rewards. Of course, if you aren't already following us on LinkedIn, just open up the mobile app, because that's what most of you do. You're not using your browser on a desktop. But open up your mobile app, and in the search box, enter CPG Guys. When you get to our page on LinkedIn, just click the blue follow button. That way you'll get to see all of the great content that we're producing. And the best thing about it, well, it's totally free. I think everyone can afford free. It's really always been about the education and sharing the journey, and that's the way we want to keep it. Also remember to check out the FMCG Guys podcast hosted by our friends Daniel and Efrain. They take the CPG Guys podcast format across the pond and speak to retail and fast-moving consumer goods luminaries from a European perspective. Just visit fmcgguys.com to subscribe to their podcast on any platform that you prefer. Of course, we are also proud to partner with Next Up, formerly known as Network of Executive Women, whose mission it is to advance all women in business and to promote the cause of gender equality and career development. Please visit nextupisnow.org/CPG Guys. Of course, the hyperlink will be in the digital liner notes of this episode to learn more about this great group. And of course, in the middle of every Wednesday episode, we drop a little Easter egg about some upcoming happenings that you can participate in through Next Up. Make sure to check them out. Our topic today is around building meaningful loyalty in the convenience retail space. You might not think of the convenience channel as a place where developing a best-in-class marketing tech stack occurs, but our guests today are here to tell you something very different. Prior to the onset of the pandemic, Casey's, a chain of over 2,400 convenience-focused retail locations in the Midwest and South, was undertaking a major digital transformation, launching a new business-to-consumer website and introducing mobile apps that would usher in a radical revenue mix change, quickly followed by a new loyalty program that was introduced just 2 months before COVID started shutting down most of our economy. Here to speak with us about all of the digital transformation underway at Casey's are two people. First, Art Sebastian, Vice President of Digital Experience at Casey's. And of course, joining him in today's conversation is my colleague at Fetch Rewards, Kevin McGovern. He's the Vice President of Retail Partner Development. Art, Kevin, welcome to the CPG Guys podcast. How you doing?
Thanks, Peter. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Excited for it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Really great to have this conversation today, because one area that we haven't delved into in any tremendous way on this podcast is convenience. And it is, there's no channel that in my estimate, has undergone more transformation in the pandemic from a day part perspective, from a mix perspective, just so fascinating. So I can't wait to get into that. So before we get into the questions I've prepared, what I was hoping to do is, Art, if you could start off by sharing with our audience a little bit more about what Casey's is. And can you give us an overview of what you and your team are charged with delivering to the organization?
Absolutely. And so first I'd start, Peter, by telling you how excited I am to work in the convenience industry. I've spent a couple decades in the grocery space, and what's really interesting about the convenience industry is that you get to see your guests, multiple times a week. They're stopping in to fuel up. They're coming in for the morning day part, lunch, and dinner. So just a little bit about Casey's. We've been in business for over 50 years. Like you said, we're based in the Midwest, 2,500 stores. We've got a diverse business with our fuel, our convenient grocery items, and our prepared foods business. Now, here's a fun stat. We're the 5th largest pizza chain in the United States. It's amazing.
It's incredible.
We sell whole pies and then slices to go. So my role at Casey's is I head up all digital experiences. So just to kind of break that down a little bit, it includes our e-commerce business, our loyalty program we call Casey's Rewards, digital marketing, and most recently we've been digitizing the store experience. That's a new space for us.
That's what I was going to ask you, whether you were overseeing the digital experience in physical retail, and it seems like you are.
Yes.
So great.
Yes.
Outstanding. That's great. So, Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about, now everybody on the podcast knows transparency purposes, I work for Fetch, but it would probably be good for you to share with our audience a little bit about Fetch and what specifically you and your team does.
Yeah, definitely. So I head up all of our retail partnerships here at Fetch. So all of our partnerships across the grocery, drug, convenience, dollar, all those spaces, that's kind of what my team is charged with. And really our goal in working with some of our great partners is identifying ways that we can help them better understand their consumers, help create significant and lifelong one-to-one connections with their consumers. And so our goal is to really power that and empower our partners to achieve that, and then use the Fetch marketing system and marketing platform to drive outcomes, drive their business forward.
Great. Well, we're going to get into that in a little bit greater detail. Why don't we get to the questions I have? What I will say is I will include into our audience, you never have to write this down, you know that, I'll include in the digital liner notes of this podcast links to Art and Kevin's LinkedIn profiles, the company websites, the company LinkedIn profiles, and I will include links to Casey's mobile apps, both Android and iOS. So we'll make sure that those are all available. Just go to the liner notes, people. It's where most of you listen to the podcast. Click the hyperlinks. You can follow along as we're talking. So let's get to the questions. So Art and I actually met, how long has it been? 15 years ago or so, back when we were at IRI, and your career has spanned obviously some time working at an industry insights provider, working on the brand side at the iconic Kraft Heinz company, and then in a number of different spurts in the what I would call the large format grocery retail, Meijer, Albertsons, and Nash Finch. So convenience retail, as we've kind of alluded to, is in many respects a very different animal, right? So what I'd like you to start with is when you arrived at Casey's in 2018, right? What was the state, and tell us, I know we kind of laughed about this before, but what was the state of digital customer experience? And what were some of the fundamental changes in building blocks you sought to activate in order to transform the customer experience, be it omnichannel, online, whatever, in this digitally driven age? And of course, what did the pandemic do to change your plans?
Yeah, so I kind of laugh as you ask that question, because when I joined the company almost 4 years ago, there was no digital experience, right? And Casey's has been around for 50 plus years, really successful in the brick and mortar space. And, after digging into the company strategy and thinking about where we wanted to position ourselves for the next 50 years, we said, hey, we want to be a much more contemporary version of ourselves today. And we made the decision that the digital experience would be sort of the first expression of a modern Casey's. So I joined the company, and the first sort of order of business was putting a technology stack in, selecting the technology, building the experiences. Some of your basic things like a website, like the mobile apps you referenced earlier, and then setting the foundation for our loyalty program. Some of that sounds basic. In grocery retail and other retail, that stuff's the norm. In convenience, as an industry, we've just been a little bit behind. Mm-hmm. Now, I would say that the last 2-3 years, we've seen massive acceleration. And certainly the pandemic kind of helped move that forward. For us at Casey's, we were positioned well because we had laid those investments down. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, we were able to move really fast and address all the changes in 2020 and 2021.
You've probably seen that Chief MarTech landscape for, the every year the number of logos on the page keeps getting bigger and bigger. I've got to imagine that, how do you sift through that and say, you know what, I'm going to focus on these particular objectives? How do you deal with that landscape? Because you've got to have people coming at you all the time for different capabilities. How do you keep your focus on delivering against that?
It's staying focused on, really two things. What are the experiences we want to create?
Okay.
So got to be focused on the experience. And then what are the outcomes we want to deliver? Mm-hmm. And if we can stay really focused on that and not get distracted, I think we can add value. And that's kind of the space that we've been in the last few years.
Brilliant. So sticking on the convenience theme, you and I coming from the world of IRI and insights, right? This is a channel that is notoriously difficult to consolidate and synthesize data, particularly when it comes to like customer data, right? I mean, I think you and I have dealt with the foibles of panel data on tracking convenience retail. To better understand your guests and provide relevant communications and offers and incentives, how do you tackle this problem?
First, I'd acknowledge the fact that the convenience industry has been challenged from a data perspective. But with that said, I'd give big kudos to several tech companies that have found a way to kind of create more data and ultimately more insight. For us, when I joined the company almost 4 years ago, one of the first things I did was stand up a CRM, a CRM platform, take the data we did have, organize it, dedupe it, just get it in shape so that we can actually use it and engage our guest base. As of recently, in the last 12 months, we launched what we call a CDP, a customer data platform.
Yeah.
And what that helps us do is not only organize the data, but unify all of it. What our guests buy in store, what they buy online, what they click on, their open rate to our emails, et cetera. And now we're leveraging that information and just have a much more relevant and contextual connection. And so to your point, it's important, right? If you want to be relevant, you got to know your guests. We call our customers guests.
Sure. So let me follow up on that. In having that data, is the goal to be building propensity signals or triggers, or have you even gotten to the point where you're creating customer segmentation on a behavior basis to help value the long term of your customers? Where are you going with that?
So it's all of it.
All of the above.
All of it. We're into multiple segmentations depending on the marketing objective and the outcomes we're looking for. We're looking at marketing automation. We're looking at, triggered marketing. So Brilliant. Just all of it.
That's great. All right, Kevin. Hey, how you doing? Thought I forgot about you, didn't I?
No, I'm here.
All right. So Fetch Rewards has been operating as an omnichannel brand loyalty mechanism for the most part, working with manufacturers to reward consumers for buying their products wherever they chose to make that purchase. How did Fetch transition into enabling retailers to engage its now almost 14 million active users, and what are kind of the core tools or the arrows in the quiver that are available to retailers within the closed loop platform?
Yeah, good context as well. Ultimately, I think at Fetch, our goal started out by, if you think about the context of a receipt, we wanted to start by rewarding people for what they bought. And as you mentioned, that could happen anywhere. But our end state and goal is to provide value across the entire receipt. And it also has to include where they're making that purchase, and ultimately at some point where they or how they pay for it. But for right now, ultimately we want to reward on where people are going. And so for us, we recognize that was a pretty large white space opportunity with how many people we had on our platform, the insights and the perspective that we had on a daily basis. There was a lot of opportunity for us to partner with innovative early stage or leading edge companies to help influence that behavior. And so ultimately what we've been able to do is work with folks like Art and companies like Casey's to help us think through that data and the perspective on the shopper, or in this case, the guests that we have, to leverage that to be more contextually relevant, more targeted, more precise with how we think about getting relevant offers or relevant marketing content in front of shoppers. And so that's, today how that's really evolved is for us to create technology tools, data tools, and insights that can not only power insights and perspective about shopper behavior, but more importantly, translate that into action. And so then being able to leverage that to drive behaviors and try and encourage guests to try something new or make that one incremental trip. And that's really the tooling that we started to build around the data set that we already had.
So, Art, for people who are professionals in the convenience retail space, encouraging guests to cross the chasm of the two divides, the one being the pump where people go to fill up their car, and the other one walking in the store and engaging in other types of commerce. That can be a pretty wide chasm, right? So getting them to do that can be very challenging. Retailers have tried a variety of tactics. What is it that you are starting to find as a mechanism that can actually accelerate that move from the pump in store at Casey's?
Yeah, that's like one of the biggest opportunities that exists in the C-store space. So it's a great question. And I'd say first, for us, we focus on making every experience as good as we can. The store experience, the digital experience, the pump experience, they've all got to be good or the guest isn't coming back. But what a great challenge of the guest who knows the brand, who is on site, and we want to get them from the pump inside. I think there's a lot of the traditional things that you see, the signage, leveraging the screens to display various ads to try to stimulate or inspire something that inside that you might need, whether it's a beverage or a snack. There's also this opportunity with the guest that's authenticating at the pump and telling us who they are by punching in the rewards account number. And for us, how do we play back meaningful content? Because we know you. We know what you buy. We know what you need. We know what you like. Yeah. And so I think that's going to be something interesting we'll play with in the coming months around meaningful content at the pump to drive you inside.
Personalizing at the moment of truth. I think that there's a certain Cincinnati-based company that made a lot of notoriety out of the first moment of truth. So that's pretty good. Hey, I want to remind our audience that today I'm speaking with Art Sebastian from Casey's and Kevin McGovern from Fetch Rewards. Okay, so Art, for a retailer like Casey's, which has a much more dynamic in-store experience and offering of products like, as you mentioned earlier, made from scratch pizza. I didn't know that, the 5th largest pizza retailer in the country. That is a huge stat. How do you think about maintaining relevance with your guests, given a very broad competitive set within convenience and what I would call convenience adjacent, like value, dollar stores, and what have you? How do you set yourself apart from the competition, and particularly in your area, which is the digital perspective?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, making sure that every experience we build is optimized, right? So a great store experience, a great pump experience, certainly a great digital experience. I think the common thread through all these experiences is data, right? Understanding data, not just looking at it, and we all have mountains of data, but understanding what we're looking for, how to use it, how to activate against it. For us, what sets us apart is the relationship we are building with our guests by delivering relevant offers, relevant content, dynamic imagery. How would you feel if we sent you a promotion for 2 whole pies when you only buy 1 whole pie, right? It doesn't make sense. And so I think leveraging data to have that deeper relationship or relevant connection is what sets us apart.
Can you give us an idea of what are the different levers or channels that you can do to communicate with your customers? What are the different mechanisms that you can take that data and turn that into a relevant experience for them?
Yeah, so we've got what I would consider sort of the typical messaging channels: email, app push, SMS. We launched an app inbox that has been really successful for us. So all those messaging channels are really robust for us. We've recently launched or got back into QR codes.
You okay? I'm just going to tell you triggered me. It is my cause celeb. I think QR codes are the great savior of the pandemic, the one bright spot. And if you're not using QR codes, I don't know what world you're living in, because it's pretty hard to order food outside of the home without a QR code, right?
We could have a whole other discussion.
I know,
on using QR codes.
Don't get me started, but that's great.
And then obviously the web and app are great screens where you can display content and engage your guests.
That's really ideal. Okay, Kevin, so let's talk a little bit about the ability of Casey's to grow its business, not only through a lot of the mechanisms that are detailed, which were primarily about taking some of our existing guests and trying to introduce them to new opportunities, increase their visits, but it's the basket versus trips thing.
Yeah.
What I'd also like to talk about is acquisition.
Yeah.
So that's one thing where I think Fetch probably plays a really great role in having 13 million going on 14 million active users.
Yeah.
When you thought about enabling customer acquisition for Casey's and working with Art, what kind of plan were you seeking to develop with his team? Is it all about acquisition, or were there other outcomes that you were hoping to put into play?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we learned pretty quickly with Art and his team is how they think about and segment the C-store business. And as we've already talked about, they're a much more dynamic C-store player in the space relative to what, I think a normal consumer might expect. What they provide between prepared foods, grocery items, actual fuel, and all the other components that they offer, that ultimately means there's a very holistic offering to not only their existing guests, but folks within their trading areas. And so what we're able to do, talking a little bit about understanding your competitors a little bit, ultimately we're able to provide data and perspective on where existing guests might be going to competitors, what folks that have never shopped at Casey's before are doing elsewhere, and use that sort of insight to think about not only net new acquisition of guests, but net new acquisition of behaviors. Mm-hmm. So whether that was to drive someone to experience Casey's Pizza for the first time, which I got the opportunity to do and can wholeheartedly say it's one of the best pizzas I've ever had.
Hey, you're talking to a boy from New Haven, Connecticut.
I need to be sensitive.
It sounds like I'm going to have to go out there and test it for myself.
You will. You certainly will. But it was experiences like that, right, where we could understand where guests were making decisions, what piece of that holistic pie that pun intended, that Casey's offers that we were missing. And so being able to encourage folks to make that pizza purchase or re-engage at the pump, all of those were tactics that we could pursue. And so ultimately what we wanted to set up with Art's team is to make sure that we could methodically go through each one of those experiences. And a big part of our relationship is the testing and iteration of our relationship. So ultimately, if we are targeting one segment and find it doesn't work, that's in many cases, that's great because we learned something. And we then use that to iterate and continue to improve. So we thought and currently think about our relationship very much in that light of let's continue to test and iterate, think about how we can segment the broader marketplace and react appropriately.
I've got to imagine, based upon that we talked about that chasm between the pump and the store, being able to isolate people who are doing one and not doing the other
exactly
allows you to think about how you can use the mechanism that Fetch has created and the value that those users have in the incentive to see if that can move the needle.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of power in what I would call cross-shopping, right? So fueling up, shopping inside, maybe ordering a pizza on a Friday night, that drives a lot of value for us. And the more we can fulfill our guests' needs, the stickier the whole situation becomes.
So Art, thinking about that in particular and how you leverage Fetch, would like to have an understanding of how you fit that into your marketing mix. What do you see as being the primary function of Fetch, and how do you see that changing your ability to achieve the KPIs that you set for the organization?
Yeah, Peter, I think optimizing marketing mix is like a forever, never-ending agenda for every marketer. You're always looking to optimize where you spend and what KPIs you're hitting, et cetera. So for us, we certainly invest in mass advertising to drive brand awareness and establish that relationship. We've really increased our focus in the digital media space, if you will, call it display and all the targeted ads. And then we get a lot of bang for our buck on our digital marketing, kind of the message channels where we're directly talking to our subscriber base. So all of that is happening. And, really in the last, call it 2 years, we've gotten behind our Casey's Rewards program, our loyalty program. And we've really levered that kind of programmed to develop this relationship. But as we think bigger and think ahead, the reality is not every one of our guests are going to want to join Casey's Rewards, right? And so we certainly want to have that value proposition available. But as we look to Fetch, it's interesting, and you've got, generally a younger consumer base. You've got a consumer base that is, digitally native and likes to save money and have fun. And for us, there's like, hey, this is something special. And so we're in the early stages. I think we're seeing some really good impact, and I think it complements our overall kind of go-to-marketing approach.
And from an ROI measurement perspective, where does that stack up against what you see taking place in the industry? Is it at par? Is it setting the benchmark, the watermark? Where do you see that, and what are you looking for in ROI measurement to ensure your organization that you're spending their money wisely?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little too early to declare where it stacks up within the marketing mix. But what I'd say is in the last few months, we've seen really compelling signals because I think it's the power of the data and the power of the platform. And so you're really investing in influencing very specific behaviors, right? And one campaign can lead to the next. And what you find yourself with is driving customer lifetime value, right? Something that every marketer strives for.
And Kevin, from your perspective, how do you ensure that your team is delivering back to Art and Casey's as accurate an ROI measurement as possible?
The biggest thing, Peter, I think it just starts with the transparency of the relationship. Ultimately, our goal and the bedrock of our relationship is predicated on the things I mentioned earlier, which is this test and iterate mentality. It serves us no benefit to run offers that don't ultimately resonate with users because our entire model is pay for performance. And so we want to ensure that everything we do is driving an incremental behavior that validates the outcomes that Art and his team want to see. So for us, what does that mean? Well, it means that we're going to have a very transparent way of how we look at measuring that behavior, how we think about our testing control methodologies and holdouts, how we measure also halo effects and think about LTV over a longer time horizon. All of those are components that help us evaluate the effectiveness of our programs. And we want to make sure that what we are doing ultimately satisfies those end consumers' needs. Otherwise, we're not being successful either.
That begs another question. I'll go back to Art on customer lifetime value. How much is that a core KPI for you, and how do you go about measuring that? I'm kind of curious from a convenience standpoint.
Yeah, I'll be honest, Peter, that's a new metric for us at Casey's.
Okay.
Obviously not in the world, but for us at Casey's, it's a new metric. There's been a few things that we've been paying a lot of attention to. One is the difference between a guest that has downloaded our mobile app and one who hasn't.
Yep.
The difference between a guest who is a Casey's Rewards member and one who isn't. Now we've got the difference between a guest who might be a Fetch user and a Casey's Rewards member. So you've got all these iterations that we're sort of finding that perfect sweet spot. And I think, that's going to lead us to some real insight.
You've got my mind building a big Venn diagram right now. I'm seeing all these overlaps, but that's really great. Hey, so my last question for you guys is thinking towards the future. I'll start with Art, but what's kind of next I'm not asking you to reveal company secrets, but are there particular trends in the industry or things that you are really focused on that are driving how you are allocating that part of your work that goes towards building for future capabilities?
Yeah, that's a really big question.
Yeah,
right? That's a really big question. So maybe I'd throw a few things out there just for the listeners to kind of take in. I think the notion of value is a big topic, and so notice I didn't say pricing, right? And so value means many different things, and it could mean pricing, but it could mean different pricing, dynamic pricing. It could be different by the time of day, the day of week. And that's going to be a space that we spend a lot more time with as we have more data and our capabilities improve. I think the other piece is, and I mentioned this a couple times, we're really focused on our guest experience, the store experience, the digital experience in our apps and our website, and the pump experience. And for us, every interaction with our guests leads to the next interaction, which leads to the next. And then over time, you have what I call a relationship. That's a big, big area of focus for us. And then the final one I'll call out, Peter, is just the store environment. I think there's tons of opportunity in the store. And so if you were to think ahead about Casey's and digital and our relationship with Fetch, I think that some of the work we'll do in the coming year will inform how we think about stores. It could inform a store layout. It could inform the products we carry or the experience we create in our physical environment. So now we're starting to really stretch our imagination, but I think we can take this into many, many directions.
And Kevin, as you think about supporting retailers like Casey's in your organization, where are you focused on driving the capabilities of Fetch for the vertical that you service?
Yeah, it's a good question. Ultimately, our continual core focus is always to drive outcomes. So we want to make sure that the things that are core and top of mind for Art's team are the same things that are core and top of mind for us. So that means whether it's the type of ad products we're building, the type of engagement we're building with users, ultimately all drives towards the same types of outcomes that Art's trying to achieve in his business. So for us, that's a really helpful way to think about how do we put opportunities and offers in front of customers that resonate, that drive impact, and drive relevancy. So a lot of buzzwords, but ultimately what that helps us get to is a platform that ensures outcomes come first, and that everything that we do behind the scenes, whether that's from a targeting perspective, a personalization perspective, is as robust and as specific as we need it to be to reach those outcomes.
I want to remind our audience that all of our content, our audio podcast, available on 40 platforms, probably more. There's some that I haven't heard of. You can bet that the CPG guys are already there. Just go to cpgguys.com. You can find that. You can find a link to the other podcasts we like to listen to when we don't listen to ourselves talk, which is all too much of the time. But in any event, go to CPG Guys and also go to LinkedIn and follow us there. All you have to do is open up your app, type in CPG Guys, and when you get to our page, click the blue follow button. That way you're privy to all the content we create, not just podcasts. We have a lot of video interviews of people. We post articles, lots of stuff there. And hey, everyone can afford it because it's free. So, and if you think that you have something that can contribute to this conversation, drop us a line at contact@cpgguys.com. Tell us what you're thinking about, and maybe you too can appear as a guest on the CPG Guys podcast. Hey, Art and Kevin, I want to thank you both for sitting down with us, having this great little conversation about a channel that we have not heretofore explored nearly enough. And now I think Sheree and I are going to be much more intrigued. So expect a follow-up call in short order, but I want to thank you both for sitting down with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, it was a pleasure.
All right, to our audience, I'll say sorry we couldn't have Sheree join us here. He is on the other coast doing all sorts of things, but for me, I really appreciated you joining us today. We look forward to speaking with you on the next episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye. The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.